Audacity in a pinstripe suit. Nigeria's oil and gas industry has never been short of drama, daring or deep pockets. What it has often lacked is indigenous audacity, the kind that stares down global majors, bureaucratic inertia and volatile markets, and still says, we can build something iconic here. Enter Wale Tinubu, alongside Jite Okoloko and Mofe Boyo. Three young men with ambition, nerve and a disruptive itch that would eventually give Nigeria one of its most recognizable independent energy conglomerates, Oando Plc. This is not just a story about oil. It's a story about timing, conviction, and betting boldly on homegrown capacity. The making of a reluctant rebel. Wale Tinubu didn't arrive in business as a wide-eyed idealist. Educated, globally exposed, and commercially fluent, he understood how capital moved and how power was brokered. But he also understood something more subversive. Nigeria's energy sector was ripe for reinvention. At a time when the industry was dominated by multinational behemoths, indigenous participation was largely peripheral, service roles, subcontracting, crumbs from a very large table. Tinubu and his partners weren't interested in crumbs. They wanted a seat at the table. Preferably one they built themselves. Series Introduction. It's Monday the 12th of January, 2026. Welcome to the 113 RD edition of The Entrepreneur, where we do a deep dive into the story and entrepreneurial journey of the three oil and gas musketeers who built Oando Plc to become one of Nigeria's most accomplished energy conglomerates. If you are visiting us for the first time, please subscribe, smash the like button, share this video, and help us grow our family. If you have already subscribed, then show your support by liking the video and making a comment. Now let's jump right back in.
Three young men and a dangerous idea. Every great entrepreneurial story begins with a dangerous idea. For Tinubu, Okoloko, and Boyo, it was this: what if Nigerians could own, operate, and scale a fully integrated oil and gas company, and do it competitively? It sounds obvious now. Back then, it bordered on heresy. At the time, the idea wasn't just ambitious, it was deeply inconvenient. Nigeria's oil and gas sector was a tightly guarded fortress, dominated by multinational giants with decades of capital, political leverage, and technical advantage. Indigenous players were expected to orbit the ecosystem, not own it. For three young men to suggest they could break into that inner circle and build something enduring was to challenge both convention and comfort. They were young, they were ambitious, and they were operating in an industry where credibility is usually leased, not earned. But they saw opportunity where others saw barriers: in deregulation, in downstream inefficiencies, and in a market hungry for energy solutions that actually worked. Wale Tinubu, Jite Okoloko, and Mofe Boyo were not naive about the odds. They understood the asymmetry of power, the complexity of regulation, and the brutal economics of energy. But they also saw what the incumbents missed: inefficiencies hiding in plain sight, policy shifts opening cracks in old monopolies, and a domestic market desperate for smarter, more responsive operators. Where others saw a closed shop, they saw a business case. Their dangerous idea was not recklessness dressed up as confidence. It was a calculated bet on local intelligence over imported assumptions. They believed Nigerians could understand Nigerian markets better than anyone else, from consumer behavior in fuel retailing to the nuances of regulatory navigation. More importantly, they believed that ownership mattered, that controlling assets, not just servicing them, was the only way to build real value and long-term influence.
Crucially, they moved early. While many peers chased safer, quicker returns, these three chose the long game, assembling capital, forging relationships, and positioning themselves at the intersection of deregulation and demand. It was audacity with homework done, ambition backed by preparation. In hindsight, the idea feels inevitable. At the time, it was radical. Three young men, daring to imagine an indigenous energy champion, not as a protest against global players, but as proof that excellence could be homegrown. That single act of imagination would become the cornerstone on which Oando was built, and the reason its story still resonates today. From opportunity to ownership. What followed was not a fairy tale but a masterclass in strategic boldness. Rather than inching cautiously along the margins, the trio pursued scale with intent, acquisitions, consolidation, and relentless expansion. Step by step, they stitched together assets, talent and capital into something far more formidable than the sum of its parts. Oando evolved into a fully integrated energy company, spanning marketing, trading, exploration, production and power. Indigenous, yes. But unmistakably global in ambition and execution. This wasn't survival entrepreneurship. This was offensive strategy. When the market tests your nerve. Oil is not for the faint-hearted, and Nigeria is not for the complacent. Price crashes, regulatory uncertainty, activist shareholders, infrastructure constraints, Oando has seen it all. What defines Tinubu's leadership through these cycles is not the absence of controversy or challenge, but resilience under pressure. The ability to restructure, refocus, and re-emerge. To make hard calls. To double down when conviction demanded it, and retreat when discipline required it. In entrepreneurship, endurance is often the most underrated competitive advantage.
Building Nigerian, thinking global. Perhaps Oando's most enduring legacy is not just commercial success, but symbolic significance. It proved that Nigerian entrepreneurs could build at scale, compete in capital-intensive industries, attract global financing, and still retain a distinctly African identity. Wale Tinubu's journey is a quiet rebuttal to the myth that big African businesses must be externally engineered. Oando wasn't imported. It was imagined, financed, and fought for on Nigerian terms. Lessons from the Oando playbook. This story leaves today's founders with some uncomfortable and empowering truths. Opportunity favors the audacious, not the cautious. Credibility is built by execution, not permission. Local knowledge can outperform global muscle. Resilience beats brilliance when markets turn hostile. Tinubu and his partners didn't wait for perfect conditions. They moved when the window cracked open and kicked it wider with conviction. The real power play. In the end, Wale Tinubu's entrepreneurial journey isn't just about oil, gas, or balance sheets. It's about ownership, of vision, of risk, and of narrative. Three young men saw an industry that wasn't built for them and decided, quite simply, to build anyway. And in doing so, they changed what was possible for indigenous enterprise in Nigeria permanently. Not bad for a dangerous idea. Hard hats, harder lessons. Wale Tinubu's journey is not a motivational poster. It's a practical manual. For today's young oil and gas professionals and tomorrow's would-be moguls, the real lessons aren't glamorous, but they are decisive. First, learn the industry before trying to disrupt it. Tinubu didn't start by shouting change from the sidelines. He mastered the mechanics, capital flows, regulation, supply chains, and geopolitics. In oil and gas, ignorance is expensive. Credibility is earned in spreadsheets, contracts, and compliance, not on social media.
Second, ambition without ownership is just employment in disguise. The leap from service provider to asset owner is where power shifts. Tinubu understood early that real influence in energy comes from controlling infrastructure, licenses, and reserves. If you don't own something critical, you're always replaceable, no matter how talented you are. Third, patience is not passivity, it's strategy. Oil and gas rewards those who can wait without losing nerve. Deals take years. Cycles turn brutally. Tinubu's playbook shows that endurance, not urgency, separates operators from opportunists. The long game isn't sexy, but it compounds. Fourth, local knowledge is a competitive weapon. Global best practice matters, but local intelligence wins contracts and survives regulation. Understanding how Nigeria actually works, culturally, politically, and commercially, gave Tinubu an edge no imported playbook could replicate. If you're operating locally, your context is your currency. Fifth, resilience is the real differentiator. Markets crash. Policies shift. headlines get hostile. Tinubu's career reminds us that setbacks are not verdicts, they're filters. The industry doesn't reward the bold ones. It rewards those who stay standing after the applause fades. Finally, think bigger than your job title. Today's analyst, engineer or trader is tomorrow's founder, if they're intentional. Tinubu didn't wait for permission to imagine scale. He worked where he was, learned relentlessly and kept one eye on ownership, structure, and legacy. The takeaway is simple but uncomfortable. Oil and gas is not for the impatient, the shallow, or the faint-hearted. But for those willing to learn deeply, endure quietly, and act boldly, Tinubu's journey proves that building something iconic is not fantasy, it's a function of preparation meeting audacity. If you would like to know more, or wish to discuss brand sponsorship of any of our videos on entrepreneurship, please get in touch on any of the social media handles below. All our content is developed from real-life experiences in a professional and entrepreneurial journey that spans across 8 countries and 4 decades. Quote of the week: how is it a dream if it doesn't scare you? Be audacious. Wale Tinubu.